We are in Judges chapter 7. Judges 7. We're probably not going to get to Judges 7 for about 15, 20 minutes, but we will get there eventually. There'll be some skipping around and, because I'm going to do that a little bit. Let's pray, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about a trip that I went on. Abba, we love you. We know that against all hope, you will revive things in our life. And sometimes you will get us down to bare bones. And when we feel stripped, we feel vulnerable. We feel like we've got to throw out that fleece about 100 times because we're just not sure. And in the middle of all that, we'd like to think that we trust you, and we do. But sometimes it's a little bit nerve-wracking. We all admit it, and you get it. You understand. But ultimately, what steps will we take? Will we take steps of faith? And will we trust you in all things? That's our goal today. It's a goal in our lives. But to be able to understand what you do with all humanity and what you're asking of us. Thank you for your patience, but please increase our faith. In Yeshua's name, amen. I am glad to be back with you. I went on a trip, and I left on the 26th. I went to my parents' house in Cuna, which is just outside of Boise, and I hung out with mom and dad. Scripture says to honor your parents, honor your mom and dad, and so twice a year, summertime and during the wintertime, I try to get to mom and dad's house. Went there, and then on the 30th, I went to Kingdom Voices Community Church, otherwise known as KVCC, and I don't like flying at all. It's too squishy, and I fly Southwest because I'm trying to get the cheapest thing that I can, and I don't like squishy, but everything was super nice. I got the aisle seat even on the left side, because I crossed my legs to this way, and so I could kind of stick out in the aisle a little bit. I think there were 6 different flights between going there and coming back, and I think on 5 of the 6 I was in the emergency exit route, and I was so happy about that. And the people that I sat next to were very pleasant. My time in Massachusetts, those people really love the Lord. They're broken. They've got issues. But the vibe was they were hungry. They told me that after every talk, that they call him Pastor Brian, it's part of the culture out there, but every talk, every one of my talks, they're at home rewatching that video and diagramming, doing all that. And I'm thinking, that's kind of a lot. I mean, it's a little bit too much. I mean, I can't listen to me for one time. How do you go home and do it over again? But that's their vibe. They're just hungry. Another thing I noticed was that they hugged a lot. And I mean, it took me a little while to get used to it. But I got used to it. And I liked it. People, let's hug appropriately. But I'm going to ask you, please, when we're done today, I'm not looking for that pastoral line, that people like, oh yeah, great. It's nice to be in service today. That's not what I'm looking for. I need to learn to hug. If afterwards you want to come hug, come hug. I would really appreciate that, because I want to hug, and we just hug appropriately, but just in Christian love, that we love one another. Just be happy I'm not demanding the holy kiss. But I am looking for a family that we are feeling joyful with one another, and so we just need to practice that. When we look at Gideon, I think most people kind of know the story. The story of a man who was a judge in Israel. And throughout the book of Judges, the bottom line is that the people of God did not stay true to the covenant of God, and they adopted the gods of the surrounding culture. They set up altars to Baal, to Asherah. They have Asherah poles. They did those sorts of things, and so their hearts committed adultery against the God who made them. And so God would just let them be in their own mess, their own vomit. And then Yahweh would raise up a leader sometimes, not sometimes, all the time. Sometimes he waited quite a bit of time before he did that. But Gideon is one of those men. And Gideon listened to the Lord, and he was kind of really scared about all this. As I go through this, I want you to know something, and that is, most of the time in my heart, and maybe in your heart, you might feel like kind of a lion inside of you. You're like, Lord, you tell me what to do, and I will do it. If it costs me everything, I will do it. But what do you want me to do? You ever have that feeling? I mean, like, I have a lot of courage, a lot of things I want to do, things I would do, but I'm kind of not really sure, what am I supposed to do? What are the next steps? What am I supposed to grab onto? I'm okay with being passionate. I just want to be passionate about the right things. Now that does bleed into a little bit more of my time there. The night that I arrived there, Pastor Brian picked me up. He said, I know you're tired, but we've got a prayer night tonight. You want to go? And my heart wanted to go. He said that his wife, Eunice, said it's not very hospitable to have a guy that's been on a plane for 9 hours to go right directly to a service. And I appreciate that they did that, but I'm like, you know what? I feel pretty good. I'm going to go. So I go to the building. By the way, it's a 7 mile by 7 mile city, Lawrence, Massachusetts. It's filled with textile mills. So everything's brick. Every building seemed about 200,000 to 300,000 square feet. And I know what I'm talking about. It's a very huge place. And so all of that's the industrial age is now gone. Now they have outfitted these things with churches and businesses and some apartment places or whatever. But I go up to the 3rd floor. I go into the back of their sanctuary area, and the lights are kind of dim. They've got this nice soft music going on. And I'm like, yeah, this is nice. This is good. And I go to the front. Not anyone there yet, just me and the Lord. And essentially, Brian says, see you in a while. Which is great, because I just want to be with the Lord. And he's with the Lord, and we're just, up there praying. They got seats like this, and they have an altar up at the front, and the music is going. It's dark. And the thing about darkness is I'm not really necessarily like all that into ambience, but enough that sometimes you just you want to be alone with the Lord. I was alone with the Lord. And then the white noise music allowed me to just get lost with the Lord. My overall feeling was, this is good, and we don't have this. I want this for Yeshua's house. But I have a love-hate relationship with buildings. Here's the hate part. The hate part is people start something, and then they start to get a little bit too into the stuff instead of the spirit. And that's not me. So that's the hate part. I do not want to get myself into a place that the building becomes the thing, or the low lights, or whatever it is that we do. I am secure with something, and that is, you can take all that stuff from us, just don't take the Holy Spirit. The Ruach HaKodesh is what we are about. But I sat there and I had both. And I couldn't deny it. I'm like, yeah, this is good. This is good. Okay, all right. And those who went to Sukkot know that Pastor Brian said, you're going to have a facility by this time next year. Here's what I'm hearing in my head. A lot of people say a lot of stuff. Now, I believe that God can do anything. That is not a contention on my part. But I'm also very careful about what I think God's going to do, because I don't want to get caught up in all the stuff. I just want to run up the mountain of the Lord. That's why we were started, is I'm running up hard the mountain of the Lord, and we don't need anything to do that. But I recognize that sometimes things could be helpful. Totally get it. So I went through that night. I'm basically like, oh, I came just for me here. I needed to be here. It wasn't them asking me to come. I'm sure I blessed them, but on night one, I knew that the Lord had me there for me. I needed to go and see that buildings aren't all that bad. And so I was there and I'm praying and going through and get done with the night, and I'm just like, I'm like torn up inside. I'm like, this is so nice. This is so nice. This is good. This is right. And so I go through the 3 different nights of talking. And in those talks, it was a just satisfying experience for me personally, because when you get to be used of the Lord to help people take the next step in faith, that's a good thing. And so I didn't throw too much at them, but enough that they were agitated to go, oh yeah, we need to kind of move toward the things. Even though Pastor Brian knows that the appointed times are commanded of the Lord, he's still brand new in this and learning. To which he's asked that I come back to teach on these things, and I didn't commit. It's a long, far away. But if the Lord wants that, I'll do it. But when I was done with those 3 times, it's more of I had this experience of being able to pour into people, and then I'm at his house on the very last night, and he brings up the whole facility thing again. Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you for one reason. I don't know. It seemed like maybe the Lord really wants something, and I don't know how to process that, okay? Because here's what I'm not going to do. I don't do capital campaigns, and I'm not asking anyone for anything. That's not how I roll. So you and I need to pray. And just pray about that, because he's pretty emphatic about it. And I'm like, okay, people talk and say a lot of things. I've seen a lot of things done in the name of the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, that I'm just like, but I couldn't fight with the experience. So what I'm asking you to do is to pray. And the reason I ask you to pray is because in the thing that Gideon has here, I have similar things as you do in your life. You think about the things that are too big for you. There are things in your life that you're asking God for right now in your life, and you know what those things are, and it is hopeless. It's hopeless. And what do we know about Yahweh? He tends to bring people to a hopeless state. And then he does his best work. And I can't deny that either. Even with Yeshua's house, I'm like, everyone calls me Eeyore. I'm like Debbie Downer. I know, but it's true. I'm just telling you the truth. When you come here, at least I'm going to tell you the truth. And the truth is this. When we were going through the first elders meetings, I'm like, 5% chance of survival. I don't know. I'm just not seeing it. Because think about this. I'm asking people to obey the commands of our God and to understand that it is a king telling his subjects what to do, and there's no option here. We don't get choice was done. When we said, yes, I do to the Messiah, our choice was done. We no longer decide, our life is not our own. Now, he doesn't like it when we just do things legalistically. He doesn't like that. And that's why, in fact, he tells Israel, do away with all your feast days. Forget it, your new moons, your Sabbaths, whatever. I'm tired of them because all you do is make it drudgery. That's why he says that, not that he's saying, I didn't really intend for you to do that. He's just like, is there any way that you can show up to our date and have a good, nice dinner with me instead of looking at your cell phone the whole time? Or wondering when they're going to bring the tab so you can move on with your life. The Lord wants our whole heart. When he had this encounter with Gideon, I see a God who took a man who was a part of a very small clan, and he's threshing wheat in a wine press because he can't be out in the open because the Midianites are going to basically swoop in and take what he's threshing. And so he's hiding. And then God comes to him, and it's kind of like Gideon's in like this hopeless state. He's existed in this state for a really, really long time. He's like, God, are you talking to me? The clan that I'm a part of, it's the least. I'm the youngest. I just don't rise up and start doing stuff. That's not how we do it here. And then the angel of the Lord says, yeah, you. What you going to do? And so he does the fleece thing. We're going to read about it. Does the fleece thing. Now, when I'm reading this, I'll just tell you the basic story and then tell you that there's a bigger picture here. He comes to Gideon. He's hiding, gives this word. I'm going to use you as a judge or a deliverer to deliver my people out of the Amalekite and Midianite hands. And you're going to have your clan, all the men that are of fighting age, come around you. There's 32,000 of them. And he says, if your heart is like not in it to win it or you're scared, go home. And so it's immediately dwindled down to 10,000. And Yahweh says, too much. We need to get this down a little bit further. And so they all go to the water, and some lap it up like this, and then some stick their face right into the water. 9,700 stick their face right in the water, and then, God says, not them, send them home. The idea, I think, is when a warrior is looking around and you have people that are aware of their surroundings, they're not going to put their face down in the water. We've heard these in sermons before. But the ones who grab the water and stick it up to their face, they're all alert and everything. We can look at that. I'm reading this and I'm thinking to myself, I have learned in the scripture there's deeper things going on. So I want to talk about those deeper things. After Genesis, the Israelites found themselves enslaved to Pharaoh. Pharaoh and Egypt are a metaphor for the world, for sin, for all the other gods, and Yahweh has pulled them out. He has pulled them out, and he shows them through Moses a pattern of what heaven is like through the tabernacle and all of his laws. And he invites them, in a sense, back to relationship to him. Back in the Garden of Eden, there were these two trees. The tree is a teacher. I'm learning this. So you have the tree at Mamre and the tree of Morah. And this is the name Morah, it means teacher. So the tree of life it's a teacher. Yahweh is giving his instruction to Adam and Eve. And then there's another tree that also, through deception, Satan comes and says, we do not want the tree of life to be your teacher. You can have your eyes opened and you can be your own teacher. You can determine the good and evil for yourself. And they took a bite of that apple. They decided that they would be their own teachers and be like God. But that was never, ever, that was not the plan. That is not what they were to do. In the book of Genesis, we see in Abraham a man whose heart was fully, he was a man who desired to not make a name for himself, but to make a name for Yahweh. And he was willing to take that apple, that fruit, and say, no, I will not eat of that tree. And so Yahweh meets him by a tree. And it just so happens that he's en route and he's right in the middle of what would be the promised land. This tree. Well, Yahweh calls them out of Egypt. He has cleansed them. How has he cleansed them? By the blood of a Passover lamb. They have gone through the Red Sea or the Gulf of Aqaba. He meets them on a mountain and he brings this, in a sense, a tree back into their sphere, into their world. And he invites them to no longer miss the mark and instead eat of this tree of life that I'm putting right in your midst, in your presence. All of this is a covenant that Yahweh is seeking to have with his people. I will be your God. You will be my people. The moment you say yes to me as king is the moment that I start to instruct you and give you things to walk in that give you life. Well, there was these 12 spies. Yahweh sends them into the promised land to do reconnaissance. And there's 2, Joshua and Caleb, that said, we can do this in the power of the Lord. And then there's 10 that say, the giants there, too big, too big. They're the ones the hearts melted within them. And then at the end of the book of Deuteronomy, they are now ready to enter into the promised land. We spent all of the book of Joshua, where Joshua takes over for Moses and brings them into the promised land, and they hit Jericho. And how does Jericho fall? By these trumpets, by prayer, by shouting. Same thing's going to happen with Gideon, by the way. They take over that property in Jericho, and then that just becomes the beachhead, and then they start to spread. They do all the southern kingdom, and then they do a mission to the northern kingdom, and now we're here, a mission in the northern kingdom, and we're almost to the top, right by Nazareth, and it's kind of the northernmost edge of the border. At the end of the book of Joshua, Joshua says these kind of famous words, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And if you don't do this, it ain't going to go good for you. Joshua gives a warning. And then I'm really sorry to Jacob last week. He had the first chapter of Gideon. I'm not sure how he worked that in quite yet because I've not seen it. But the idea here is, I'm just sorry. I should have done 6, 7, and 8, but in my life, when I work full time, you basically say, I've got 45 minutes to plan the whole year and then schedule all the speakers, and you get what you get and don't have a fit. But it was one of the times I'm like, ooh, I kind of missed the mark on that one. But still, I'm glad that he went over this. In chapter 6, verse 8, we have a prophet that is an unidentified prophet. But this prophet is going to identify the violation of Israel. Remember, Joshua gave a warning. Don't break the commandments of God. As for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. What are you going to do? And there's this tree, and there's this large standing stone, this listening stone, as it bears a witness against all the people. You have this stone that's an inanimate object, but it's heavy, it's there, I guess it's leaning against a tree. But again, the idea here is this tree is an instructor tree. It symbolizes the covenant, and everyone knows what the covenant's all about, but you have this stone. It's a witness that's set up. And Joshua gives a warning, and then this prophet identifies the violation. Jacob read it last week, but it's important that we read it again. Chapter 6, verse 7, now it happened when the sons of Israel cried out to Yahweh on account of Midian, because Midian was doing bad things to them, that Yahweh sent a prophet to the sons of Israel, and he said to them, thus says Yahweh, the God of Israel, it was I who brought you up from Egypt and brought you out of the house of slavery. I delivered you from the hands of the Egyptians and from the hands of all your oppressors and drove them out before you and gave you their land. And I said to you, I am Yahweh your God. You shall not fear the gods of the Amorites in whose land you live, but here's the violation. You have not listened to my voice. Now, you see that then the angel of Yahweh came. No one can quite identify who this prophet is. Not that I know of. Maybe you figured it all out last week. I don't know. But here's what we know, is that the violation has been identified. And Gideon is chosen by Yahweh to address this issue, and he's going to fight the physical battle. And then Yeshua is going to later arrive as the true teacher, and he will restore all things. Now, I've got a picture that I'm going to show up here. This is a picture from the ridge of Nazareth. Yeshua, as a young boy, would have looked over the valley of Jezreel, which is this valley. See how far you can see? It's quite a ways. That little hilltop over on the left, that's Mount Tabor. And then somewhere off in the distance are these other hills where Gideon would have fought, where Deborah and Barak Barak didn't do a darn thing, but Jael came and stabbed Sisera. So Yeshua would have seen this. He would have known the stories. And up here in this northern part, and one of the things I ask myself is, here's what I know about Yahweh. Yahweh has brought them into a promised land. And in that promised land, his desire is that they would fully trust in Yahweh, obey his commands, thereby lifting up the Messiah, but they didn't do that. And part of the reason they didn't do that is because when Yahweh said to conquer all the lands, they didn't conquer everybody. And so you had the influence of the other nations, Amalekites, Midianites in this case, and their gods became part of the cultural fabric. And so Gideon's dad, he ends up having an altar to Baal and these Asherah poles. It's a sad situation because it becomes so commonplace. Here's what we all have to do in our own lives. What has become commonplace in our culture that we have erected idols everywhere around us and we're not even aware of that? We need to let those things go. But out there where Yeshua could see on one of the hills, go back to it. Make sure I'm getting it right. Yeah, the hill of Moreh, which means the hill of instruction. Tabor to the left, but over on the right there, one of those, they're not sure which that I'm aware of, the hill of Moreh. There's two things that happen there that are important to our understanding of Gideon. One is the healing of the young man, the Shunammite woman, who her son died. And I'm going to read you that story. So this is out of 2 Kings chapter 4, starting in verse 32. Then Elisha came into the house, and behold, the boy, the Shunammite woman's boy, was dead. Now, she was barren. Elisha had gone on this route many, many times. He had a relationship with the mom and the dad, and the mom said, the prophet Elisha, the mom said to the dad, he comes by here quite a bit. Could we do a room for him so when he comes, he has a place to stay? And one of those times, he creates a situation where she's got no money and he provides enough oil that she can sell it and then she can live and so forth. And then also she's barren and she ends up having a son. Well, her son dies. So verse 32, then Elisha came into the house and behold, the boy was dead and laid on his bed. So he entered and shut the door behind them both and prayed to Yahweh. And he went up and lay on the child and put his mouth on his mouth and his eyes on his eyes and his hands on his hands. And he stretched himself out on him. Can you see the drama here? There's a lot going into this particular healing. And then the flesh of the child became warm. And then he returned and walked in the house once back and forth and went up and stretched himself on him, and the boy sneezed 7 times, and then the boy opened his eyes. Now, there's some commentators that this 7 times sneezing is here's Elisha coming in the power of a prophet, and he has to go through these steps. He's laying on this boy, and then whereas his life was taken from him, now these 7 times is a complete restoration. It's like He's breathing in and he sneezes 7 times. In other words, the scripture doesn't just tell us random stuff. This is a complete reviving of this young man. He is fully alive. And then he called Gehazi and said, call the Shunammite. So he called her. She came into him. That's not up there. But her son is alive. Now that happens on where Gideon is fighting. It happens on one of those hills. Can we still have that one slide up, please? Let's keep it up there for a little while. It happens there in the background. Yeshua can see this. Now that happens on one side of the hill. It happens on the south side. But around the corner on the same hill, the hill of Moreh, is the widow of Nain's story. Now that is in Luke chapter 7, verses 11 through 17. It's literally the same hill, but on the other side. And Yeshua now is doing his public ministry. And it says, and it happened that soon afterwards, he went to a city called Nain. And his disciples were going along with him, accompanied by a large crowd. What you have here is the teacher. And this crowd, I think, becomes these sort of living stones that are witnessing the teacher. Remember, the tree back at Moreh, the teacher, we have a tree there, and then that tree is accompanied by a dead stone. It is a witness, it's there, it's a monument, but now we have these crowd of people witnessing the real teacher. Verse 12, now as he approached the gate of the city, which is now this language of, he is doing this in front of all these witnesses. Behold, a dead man was being carried out, the only son of his mother. And she was a widow. This is a problem for a woman who is a widow. She has no husband. She has an only son. The text says it's an only son. And so now she has no down line. She has no way to produce income. Her name is about ready to be blotted out of Israel. He is dead. There is no hope for her until the teacher arrives. So I just want you to hear this. She has no hope. She was a widow, and a sizable crowd from the city was with her. And then the Lord saw her. He felt compassion for her, and he said to her, do not cry. And then he came up and he touched the coffin. This isn't a coffin. It's more like a board with a dead person on top of it embalmed. It's open, like an open casket with no walls. And he touches, and the bearers come to a halt, and he said, young man, I say to you, arise. And the dead man sat up and began to speak. And Yeshua gave him back to his mother. And fear gripped them all, and they began glorifying God, saying, now I want you to know what's happening here. It is on the same hill that happened with Elisha. He is revived. They all know the story. They know he was a great prophet. Elisha was a great prophet. And now they are glorifying God, saying, a great prophet has arisen among us. And God has visited his people. And this report concerning him went out all over Judea and all the surrounding district. Here's my point to you. My point to you is that Yeshua is in this battleground. And everyone knows the story of Gideon. Everyone understands what happened to Elisha. Everyone is looking at Yeshua. And what Yeshua is doing is he's reclaiming ground that was taken not by the Amalekites and the Midianites, but by death. That's what I want you to see. Gideon, He restores the land. Elisha restores the womb. But Yeshua restores all of that and restores the future. Because our future is death. But death does not have the final word. He is the resurrection and the life, and he has secured us in him. When you look at the Valley of Jezreel, you're kind of looking here southeast, but if you look due south, you would have been looking down toward the heart of Israel. And right there in the middle, we've already studied this, but you have the Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. Choose life or death. That is the oak at Moreh. That's the teaching of Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. The teaching there in the middle of Shechem is, what will you choose? Life or death? Blessings and curses? Choose life. But at Nain, up here where Yeshua is hanging out, we have another teacher who is now saying, I am the life. I am the one that has the power. So here's what I'm seeing in the Gideon story, and we'll read it. I'm seeing a man who is one judge in Israel, and what I see is more time devoted to this judge than, like, for example, in Genesis, we have a lot of time biblically devoted to Joseph, and there's a reason for that. But there's this man, Gideon. It's because God has raised up the lowest tribe, the lowest man in fear for his life, and he comes and uses a nothing of a person and says, you are a mighty warrior. And the history of the promised land is this, that Yahweh has invited his people to come and dwell with him for the purpose that they would find life in him and that they would no longer do the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, but instead they would not, literally at the very end of Judges, the refrain is they all did what was right in their own eyes. But this is what we no longer do. If you are of Yeshua, if you are a part of the kingdom, the sheep listen to his voice and you no longer do what is right in your own eyes. But the people that were of Israel, of Gideon's clan, and the other clans, by the way, right there, that hill at Moreh, that's where it was Naphtali that came together. It was two other tribes. I wrote them down. But that's one thing, I've never been to Israel. And I always say to myself, first of all, it's very expensive. And right now might not be the best time to go. We've kind of had some tumult in the last few years. But I'm thinking now that I know enough of the geography, that I'm thinking it might be good to kind of go and see. I think part of the reason that I sometimes struggle with the geography is when you've not walked the land, when you've not seen it, it's really hard to take the words off the page and begin to see all that's happening. I'm getting a little bit better at it. I can see it now. And I've always said to people, really, I'm a citizen of the kingdom, and I don't really need to know the geography of Israel to be a citizen of the kingdom, and I'll get there eventually, as all of you will as well. But I'm starting to see that there's a good reason for me to see with my own eyes, to see where the battle of Gideon was, to see where the hill of Moreh was, to see where Ebal and Gerizim was. And I know now it's in the middle in relationship to Jerusalem down to the south. I can see it. But Yahweh has outlined a land for himself, and within the confines of that, he has a people, and the people have refused to eradicate all the other gods. What do we take from this? What gods have we refused to eradicate in our own lives? And the thing is, most of those gods are not little trinkets that we have sitting around on our shelves. Most of our gods have to do with our time and things that we give ourselves over to, and they're in direct competition with Yahweh's holy days, for example. And Yahweh says, don't do that. And I sometimes fear for people that contend that they're believers, But then in Romans chapter 1, those that do not do the things of God and they start to allow trinkets of whatever idols they have in their lives, it doesn't look like little statues of men. They were a little bit more explicit back then, but here we get a little more creative with our idols. But what does God do in Romans chapter 1 to the people who give themselves over to those creatures? He allows their minds to continue to be debased. He gives them over to their raunchy thinking. And then everyone feels normal in that. And that's not good. It's horrible. So what is Yahweh doing with this promised land? He is purifying a people. He is being super patient with them as he brings them judges, leaders who will be led of God to do what the people are not doing for themselves. Can I tell you this too, that there are things that Yahweh is doing in your life that you didn't ask for, that are just painful. And it's the best thing for you. And I hate to say it, but it just is. Now, I knew it would be a while before I got to this, but I had to set all of it, set the stage. Judges chapter 7, verse 1. Then Jerubbaal, that is Gideon. Jerubbaal means let God contend. Not let God, let Baal contend. Because what had happened was in chapter 6, verse 28, that he went to his father's house, and he took down that altar to Baal. He cut down the Asherah pole. All of his clansmen are pretty mad, and they want to kill him. And his dad says, hey, if Baal is a real god, let him take care of himself. And so calling him this nickname, Jerubbaal, is not a pejorative term at all. It is, okay, he's got some chutzpah, and his dad seems to be on his side. We certainly don't want to choose Baal, in part because I think the people know that they've done wrong, and they're just kind of fessing up to it. And all the people who were with him, they rose up early, camped beside the spring of Harod, and the camp of Midian was on the north side of them by the hill of Moreh, the hill of teaching in the valley. And Yahweh said to Gideon, the people who are with you are too many for me to give Midian into their hands, lest Israel honor who? Themselves. If they win with too many people, they're going to think that it was by their might that they did this. But that is not how Yahweh wants to deal with our lives. Saying, my own hand has saved me. So now come, call out in the hearing of the people, saying, whoever is afraid and trembling, let him return and depart from Mount Gilead. So 22,000 people returned, and then there's 10,000 that remained. And then Yahweh said to Gideon, the people are still too many. Bring them down to the water, and I will test them for you there. And it will be that he of whom I say to you, this one shall go with you, he shall go with you. But anyone whom I say to you, this one shall not go with you, he shall not go. So he brought the people down to the water, and then Yahweh said to Gideon, everyone who laps up the water with his tongue as a dog laps, you shall set him aside by himself, and so also everyone who kneels to drink. Now the number of those that were lapping with their hands, putting their hand to their mouth, was 300 men. But all the rest of the people kneeled to drink the water. And then Yahweh said to Gideon, I will save you with the 300 men who lapped, and will give the Midianites into your hands. So what is Yahweh doing? Yahweh uses the Midianites primarily in this story, but the Amalekites are also there. And he brings these people in as his tools to strip Israel and the clans down so that they can get to a place where they call out to God. Have you not noticed this in your life? It is really hard to fabricate a heart that longs for the Lord. And usually we do that best when we're in pain. And I've done this enough that I'm like, when I'm not feeling so much pain, I cry out as hard as I can. Because I've learned that I better cry out, because if I don't, he will put me in a spot where I will have to cry out. I don't want that. I'm tired of pain. And the reason I tell you that is even in my own life, I can't tell you everything, but people tell me stuff. And let's just say in the event that, things get going good in my life, maybe at Yeshua's house or something, I have learned all of that stuff is fleeting. We have got to cry out after the Lord every moment of our lives, and we can never get too big for our britches. So Yahweh uses the Midianites. Now this is going to be probably barley season, probably around Passover. And during that barley season, what the Midianites would come and they would do is they would essentially take the harvest so that they wouldn't have food, or they would destroy it. And they were really fast. Their technology back then was camels, and they had camels, and they would go in. It was basically kind of like a stealth fighter that went in and did the job and then came out. And I'm not trying to allude to anything, but it's an illustration. It's an in, out. The Midianites would do this, and they did it really, really well. That was the technology of the day. So let all the other people go, each man to his place. So the 300 men took the people's provisions and the trumpets in their hands, and then Gideon sent all the other men of Israel, each to his tent, but retained 300 men. And then the camp of Midian was below him in the valley. Remember, we're on that hill of Moreh that we saw off in the distance. Now it happened that the same night that Yahweh said to him, "Arise, go down to the camp, for I have given it into your hands. But if you're afraid to go down, then both you and Purah, your young man, your assistant, go down to the camp and hear what they're saying. And afterward, your hands will be strengthened, that you will go down against the camp." So he went with Purah with the man, his young man, out to the outskirts, or to the outer perimeter of where all these Midianites were. You need to know, in the next chapter, I think it says that there's 135,000. Yeah, 135,000. That's a lot of people when you got 300. There is no way that they are winning this. No way. Again, I want to bring to your mind that think of things in your life right now that there is no way. None. I could cry with you because I know some of those things. I know the no ways in your life. I know the no ways of my life. I'm already resigned to the fact, and I'm okay with it. This is not like me not even being Eeyore now. This is just me being real. The real truth of the matter is I'm going to get up every day of my life until I retire at 70, unless Yahweh returns, which I want him to, but I'm going to get up and I'm going to go be a substitute teacher. That is the reality of my life, and I don't see it changing. I am 55 years old. I'm going to live in reality. No one's hiring me. I teach the Torah. There's no university that's going to hire me. I'm not going to be a published guru. My life is set. There's nothing that's going to change. Except sometimes I think that maybe God can. I don't really know. Sometimes my life feels a little bit like a fiery furnace. And I don't try to be too pious, but sometimes I just say, I'm in the furnace of life. My God can save me. But if he doesn't, I'm still not going to bow the knee to your God. So I don't know where you are in life. I don't know how hopeless things feel. But whatever that is, you just know that the same God that was there raised up a prophet that took that widow, the Shunammite woman, and then he made life, and then he shows up at Nain. The same battle is being fought over and over again, and Yeshua is the God of he overcomes death. There's things that have died in my life, and he can even overcome that. I want you to know that more than anything in my heart, yes, he has already won, because my security out of the pit of hell and eternal separation from him is secure. That is done for you. It is secure, absolute. The battle has been won. So no matter what happens between now and your last breath, you've already been revived. You're good. But what I see about this God is he's also concerned about these last days that you have left. Verse 12, now the Midianites and the Amalekites, all the sons of the east, were lying in the valley as numerous as locusts. I mean, it's a lot. Their camels were without number. They had all kinds of F-35s, as numerous as the sand of the seashore. And then Gideon came, and behold, a man was recounting a dream to his friend. And basically, I recount the dream. A loaf of barley bread. Barley is a poor man's bread. It's humble. Not like the wheat. He was threshing that, but it was a barley bread, was tumbling into the camp of Midian, and it came to the tent and struck it so that it fell and turned it upside down so that the tent lay flat. Tent is just code for the whole army of the Midianites. It's going to fall. And his friends answered and said, this is nothing less than the sword of Gideon and the son of Joash, the man of Israel. And God has given Midian and all the camp into his hand. And who is overhearing this? Gideon is overhearing this. And undoubtedly it emboldens him. He's already fleeced a couple times. Yahweh is so gracious. He knows that if you're with a band of 300 men, you're as good as dead against 135,000. He knows. And he gives them little whispers. Maybe in your prayer life too, you'll hear this. You'll get little whispers from the Lord that he loves you. He knows where you're at. He knows what your needs are. He knows those things in your life. Now it happened that when Gideon heard the account of the dream and the interpretation, that he bowed and worshipped. And then he returned to the camp of Israel. He said, arise, for Yahweh has given the camp of Midian into your hands. And then he divided the 300 men into 3 companies. So you got 100, 100, 100. And they had empty pitchers. All had empty pitchers in their hands, torches on the inside of the pitchers. Verse 17, and then he said to them, look at me and do what I do. There is no hand that has a weapon in it. This is like Jericho all over again. They're on the outskirts of the camp. He said, what I do, you do, verse 18. And then he blew a trumpet. Then you shall blow the trumpets all around the camp and say, for Yahweh and for Gideon. Now, some people are wondering, wait, what's this and for Gideon part? Is that okay at this point? And the thing is, yeah, it's okay at this point. He's not getting too big for his britches. The thing is, he's going to get too big for his britches, but he hasn't probably at this point. It's just a rallying cry. It is for Yahweh, but it's also a clear indication to the 300 men that it is Gideon. So he has rallied them. Verse 19, so Gideon and the 100 men who were with him came out to the outskirts of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, which is right in the middle of the night between 10 and 2 a.m., 10 p.m., 2 a.m. Then he had just set up the watch, and they blew the trumpets and smashed the pitchers in their hands. And what do you know? Everything happened just as he said. And then down in verse 23, now this is the convergence. When I told you I couldn't remember what the tribes were, it's Naphtali, Asher, and Manasseh, verse 23. So the 300 did the initial work. Yahweh has started to make the Midianite people fight against each other because they're in utter torment in their souls, and they start beating up one another, killing one another. And then the rest of the clans come in to finish the job. Now Gideon had sent messengers, verse 24, throughout the hill country of Ephraim, saying, come down to Midian and capture the waters before them, as far as Beth Barah and the Jordan. So all the men of Ephraim were summoned, and they captured the waters as far as Beth Barah and the Jordan. And then they captured the 2 princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. And they killed Oreb and the rock of Zeb. And then they killed Zeb at the winepress of Zeeb. That's how you would say that. You know, us English readers, Ze'eb. Oreb means raven. Ze'eb means wolf. These are predators. We're going to encounter two other men in chapter 8, but these first little group are the predators, the raven and the wolf. They're seeking to take all of the crops, the livelihood. They're looking to just to make their lives miserable. You too have an Oreb and a Ze'eb that come after your life, and their desire is to make your life miserable. It is the enemy that is causing you or wants you to not want to trust the Lord and want to make your life miserable, so much so that you look for a way in your flesh in order to get your needs met. The predators come first. And then after that, some death is going to come. And we'll meet Zebah and Zalmunna in just a second. But for now, what have you got? What kinds of things, you've read this, but you probably have some insights or questions. And just say your name first.
I'm Kathy. When I was reading this, I actually read it this morning so it would be fresh. And I read how there were so many camel, you couldn't even count how many camel. And you have to think that there's a person that's going to ride each one of those camels, or maybe more than one. And for God to, or Yahweh to put them down to 300, you know, it's amazing, and it blew me away as I read the whole story like more than once. And I feel like God wants to do that in our lives today. I really believe he does. I believe he wants us to have more trust in his abilities toward us. Like just reading Ephesians 3:20, this is one of my favorite verses, because, you know, as a single parent, various things in my life, this verse has come true in my life many times. And it's now to him who is able to do exceedingly more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. To him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. Amen. And I think that's how they lived back then. I mean, for him to go down there with 300 men when they had, how many you said? Thousands and thousands?
135,000.
That was on faith. That was on the strength of his faith, based on what Yahweh said to him. Them. And so I think in this day and age, like a church for us, a building for us, nothing for him to do. He could blink an eye and we would have it. But he wants us to pray believing. I believe that. Not doubting, not questioning, not coming up with excuses, not saying I'm too old to be hired by somebody else.
Sure.
I say that sometimes too.
Yeah.
But nothing is too hard for him. All is possible with him. And this verse, he has already done so many things beyond my imagination. Even little things, like I didn't have enough money for an oil change, but I had to scrape up some. And I get there and I meet this kid who absolutely fell in love with me and gave me a discount. So I got $50 off my oil change. Now that may not be a lot for everybody, but it's personal and sweet because he knew where I was and he knew that that would bless me. And it did. And I told everybody.
Yeah.
The place.
Yeah.
Everybody I talked to. So, I mean, I just wanted to encourage everyone in here because everybody has a lot of needs right now. Big ones, small ones, it doesn't matter. He loves us so much and he wants to do these things for us. I know that from being a single parent. He wants to do that for us. He's our Abba. So anyway.
It's true.
When I read this story, it just brought all that up from my past.
Yeah. Thank you. In the back.
Hi, I'm Victor. So Yahweh had already told Gideon, I delivered them into your hand, but he was afraid. And so God said, well, if you're afraid, go down, and God encouraged him. Mm-hmm. And this morning, in the Torah study, Moses was afraid, and he sent him Aaron. And so even though God, it constantly amazes me that if Yahweh speaks to somebody personally, and he says, I'm with you. And people are still afraid, even though Yahweh speaks to them and says, I'm with you, I've delivered you, I've promised this, I will give you that. And people are still afraid. And I was telling somebody this morning, when we were at Sukkot, I spoke one morning and I said, I'd like to think I'm the guy who wouldn't basically turn my back on Yahweh if he promised me something. But we keep seeing over and over and over, Yahweh says, I'm with you. I'll hold you by the hand. I'll carry you. And people are still afraid. And so the two examples of Moses and Gideon just show me that he knows we're afraid, but he still wants to encourage us. He will still take that extra step to say, see, I told you I'll be with you, but in addition to that, here's something else to encourage you. So.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, it's Chicken. So I think it's interesting with regards to the Luke 4 portion because he calls out the people as they're listening to him, like, what are you going to do here, Yeshua? You're saying that, like, this is fulfilled in your presence. What's going on here? And then he lectures them, chastises them, and says that there was two people that God was sent to, specifically Naaman. So he cleanses a Gentile, and then it's the woman who is from Sidon, and her son, who is healed by Elijah. And so I was wondering, because Elijah, he stretches out 3 times over the boy, and the boy is restored. Elisha does it 7 times, and the boy is restored. And both these prophets do miracles by Yah, of course, but through these prophets, there's miracles of oil in provision, which oil is used for light. So I'm looking at Yeshua, and he chastises them, and then they go to throw him off a cliff because of what he said. And it was interesting, that picture you had, because it's like, I'm just kind of like, I wonder if that was the cliff.
It was.
That is the cliff?
Yeah.
Okay. So, like, it's like they're seeing all of these things in the backdrop, because that's where Barak, with that army, they defeat that army on the slopes of Mount Tabor and chase them down. And then they're looking in the backdrop where they actually see where the Syro-Phoenician woman, where Naaman back behind them with the Jordan, and it's just like this pile upon pile of things that they're seeing. But my question to you is that, do you see anything spiritually significant with regards to Elijah doing it 3 times to restore an only son, and with Elisha with the 7 times the only son, and then Yeshua simply just touching it, the body, and it's restored? Do you see something with the 3 and the 7 pointing to something? I was curious about your insight on that.
Well, I don't have insight. I have an opinion on the latter 2, is that whereas the prophet Elisha seems to have this double portion, there could be a play of thoughts or a framework there, but I don't know. But what does Yeshua do that is very different? He doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't have to lay on the guy. He just speaks it. He speaks life. He reverses that. Whereas there is more rigmarole that has to happen through Elisha. I think your question on the Elijah one, I don't know. And that's up in the Sidon area. Yeah, which is up and to the left, up on the coast up here. And it seems, I can't even remember if that is technically inside Israel or not. It seems like it's outside, but I don't know. So I don't have any insight. I know the story, but I don't know. I was more comfortable bringing up the Elisha story because it was right there in their backyard, and because it was on the same hill with the widow of Nain. That one I could make the connection on, but the Elijah one, I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Over here? No? Anyone else? Okay, let's continue on. Chapter 8. Then the men of Ephraim, you're going to see some diplomacy here, said to him, "What's this thing that you've done to us? Not calling us when you were to fight against Midian." You got to remember, they were filled with ego, and we have the largest tribe, the dominant tribe of Ephraim to the north, and they were the ones that were in charge. If we're going to clean house, we're the ones doing it, not some dweeb that went to that high school. Whatever high school you went to, we don't even know what you are. And then you didn't even play football. I mean, you really nothing. I mean, I was going to say you were in band, but I shouldn't say that. Sorry. You can not hug me afterwards as a result of that. Hey, I played football. There's this kind of thing that you thought about. But anyway, I know I got in all kinds of trouble there. Fun fact, I guess that there are lots of people who can read music are a lot smarter and do better in school, and I can't read music, so guilty as charged. Well, Ephraim, they come to him and say, "Look, you can't do this," and they strongly contended with him. Verse 2, "But he said to them, 'What have I done now in comparison with you?'" Now he's using a little bit of flattery here. "Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the grape harvest of Abiezer?" Kind of like this. I started it. It's true, I started it. I went and, the 300 men, we blew really hard, and, we didn't really draw our swords or anything. We started the confusion, but you finished it. So, you get the accolades here. God has given the princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeeb, into your hands, and what I was able to do in comparison with you, that's nothing. And then their anger toward him subsided when he spoke this word. So again, diplomacy is happening here. Verse 4, "Then Gideon and the 300 men who were with him came to the Jordan and crossed over, weary yet pursuing. And he said to the men of Sukkoth," there are two Sukkots or Sukkoths in the Bible. One is down close to Egypt. When they were coming out, they camped in Sukkot for just a little while. This is a different Sukkot or Sukkoth. "Please give loaves of bread to the people who are following me." Here's what Gideon says. "I have just gone through this battle. We are on our way to grab these other kings. We haven't met them yet. But in the grabbing of the other kings, we are very, very hungry." And they're going to say, "Yeah, can't do that." And the reason they say we can't do that is because they know that if they give them any food and then they don't end up finishing the job, that those kings are going to come and say, "You're an accomplice, we're killing you." Okay? "Please give us loaves of bread so that the people who are following me, for they are weary, and I am pursuing Zebah," which means sacrificer or slaughterer. So you got to remember, before, predators are after you, but then there's some even bigger fish to fry. These guys, Zebah, they're the sacrificer. They're the slaughterer. And Zulmunna means shadow is denied. Shadow, from the word cell. We covered that a few weeks ago. Where we want to be under the shadow of his wings, the cell of his wings. But Zulmunna, his shadow will be denied. Yeshua ultimately is going to keep your ravens and the wolf at bay in your life. And then ultimately, the bigger two, the sacrificer, the slaughterer, the one who wants to kill you, his shadow will be denied. So you just need to see the word picture here. These are the kings of Midian, but the princes of Sukkot said, "Our hands are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna already in your hands, that we would give bread to your army." What's that all about? Well, back in the day, after you conquered a person, you cut off their hands, and then you took them. Or you could decapitate. I mean, it sounds gross and all, because it is, but what did David do with Goliath? Whoosh, whack! Off with your head. So back then, they're like, hey, wait. You don't have their hands in your hands. That's just kind of weird. I mean, I cannot understand even walking up with someone saying, hey, got their hands. It just would be awkward for me. But they were a little bit more barbaric. Why did they do that? I mean, what did they do with them? Well, what did they do with the hands? I mean, I guess they stuffed them and stuck them up over the fireplace. I don't know. It was just a way for them to understand that we have taken these guys. It's a way to assert tribal dominance over others. I'm moving on. Verse 7. And Gideon said, thus, when Yahweh has given Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, then I will thrash your bodies with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars, which does come to pass. So he went up from there to Penuel. You can do a cross-reference, but this is where we meet God, the face of God, and spoke similarly to them. And then the men of Penuel answered him just as the men of Sukkot had answered. So he spoke also to the men of Penuel, saying, when I return safely, I will tear down this tower. What Gideon is saying is, your lives are in danger, and any tower that you have erected to a competing god, I'm going to tear that down. Verse 10. Now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor, and their camps with them about 15,000 men. So if you wondered how I got to 135,000, notice the 120,000 add the 15. All who were left of the entire camp of the sons of the east, for the fallen were 120,000 men who drew the sword. And then Gideon went up by the way of those who dwelt in tents on the east of the Nobah and Jogbehah, and struck the camp when the camp was unsuspecting. And then Zebah and Zalmunna fled, and he pursued them and captured the two kings of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna, and he threw the whole camp into utter fright. And then Gideon, the son of Joash, returned from the battle by the ascent of Heres, and he captured a youth from the men of Sukkot and questioned him. So the youth wrote down for him the princes of Sukkot and its elders, 77 men. And then he came to the men of Sukkot and said, behold, Zebah and Zalmunna, about whom you reproached me, saying, are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna already in your hand, that he would give me bread to your men who are weary. And then he took the elders of the city, as well as the thorns and the wilderness and the briars, and with them he taught the men in Sukkot a lesson, which is just code for he beat them up with this stuff. And he tore down the tower of Penuel and killed the men of the city. This is not a very pleasant time. And then he said to Zebah and Zalmunna, what kind of men were they whom you killed at Tabor? And they said, they were like you. And they said, they were like you, each one resembling the son of a king. And I'm thinking that what happens to Gideon at this moment is he's starting at this point to get a little bit inflated with himself. And they recognize that he's had a pretty good victory here. He's just taught Sukkot a lesson. And, you kind of look like a king. You're really good looking. And it's clear that God is with you. And he said, they were my brothers, the sons of my mother. As Yahweh lives, if only you had let them live, I would not kill you. All right, here's something that I can only allude to. What's changing for Gideon right at this point is he's turning into what's called a Goel, an avenger of blood. He wasn't going to kill them. But earlier on, he has some pain where these kings had killed his brothers, and now he is the closest kinsman redeemer. And that's why he ends up killing them. They haven't escaped to a city of refuge. And he does exactly what he's supposed to do, and that is avenge the blood of his brothers. So he said to Jether, his firstborn, rise and kill them. And here's another little slip. Why doesn't he just kill them himself? It's because he's thinking he's kind of kingly, and he wants that to pass down to his son. And so he gives essentially a sword to his son. You do the killing. It's a way to pass down what I've started. But the youth did not draw his sword, for he was afraid, because he was still a youth. I mean, this kid was probably 12 years old. You know, who knows? But somewhere in that age. He's just a younger guy. And then Zebah and Zalmunna said, rise up yourself and smite us. For as the man, so is his might. What's going on here? It is a utter shame. You do not want your legacy to be killed by a woman like Jael. That is shameful. And if you're going to go down in battle, it better be against the big kahuna. Don't put your kid on us. That would be shameful to us. They already know they're going to die. But at the very least, they don't want their kids and their memory to be in a shameful situation. So Gideon arose and killed Zebah and Zalmunna. Our warrior, Messiah Yeshua, will kill the slaughterer after you and will kill death. It has no dominion over you. He is Gideon. But here's what Yeshua didn't do that this one who looks like a king does. And he took the crescent ornaments that were on the camels' necks. They had a bunch of silver and gold. And they had all these chariots. They had the bling. They had enough for themselves, and they had enough for the camels. And so now him acting as king, even though he's not admitting his king, he begins to act like it, and he takes these from them. Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, rule over us, both you and your son, also your son's son, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian. But Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, nor shall my son rule over you. And he says a good thing, Yahweh shall rule over you. There's a however. His son, one of his sons, we're going to get there next time, is named, oh, no, it's actually here. You can look at it, verse 34. They name him Abimelech, which means son of a king. I'm not a king. Don't look at me. I'm no big deal. Yahweh was with me. But, I did kind of do something. So the gold's good. The silver's good. And we might send you some hints through, our son of a king. Maybe you could pick up on the hint. Now, they wanted a king. They wanted this valiant warrior. Verse 24, yet Gideon said to them, but I would make one request of you, that each of you give me an earring from the spoil. For they had gold earrings because they were Ishmaelites. And they said, we will surely give them. So they spread out a garment, every one of them threw an earring there from his spoil, and the weight of gold earrings, and that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, besides the crescent ornaments, and the pendants, and the purple robes, which were on the kings of Midian, and besides the neck bands that they were on the camels' necks. And then Gideon made it into an ephod, another mistake here, and placed it in his city, Orphrah. And all Israel played the harlot with it there. The ephod is only for the high priest in the holy city. You don't do that here. So that it became a snare to Gideon and his household. So Midian was subdued before the sons of Israel. Midian was subdued before the sons of Israel, and they did not lift up their heads anymore, and the land was quiet for how many years? 40 years. Then Jerubbaal, verse 29, and the son of Joash went and lived in his own house, and then Gideon had 70 sons, which is kind of a kingly thing to do because you've got many wives and concubines. They were direct descendants, and he had many wives. Verse 31, and his concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son, named him Abimelech. And then Gideon, the son of Joash, died at a good old age and was buried in the tomb of his father Joash and Orpha and the Abizarites. And it happened that as soon as Gideon was dead, that the sons of Israel turned back and played the harlot with the Baals and made Baal Berith their god. Thus the sons of Israel did not remember Yahweh their God, and delivered them from the hands of all their enemies on every side, nor did they show loving kindness to the household of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, in accord with all the good that he had done to Israel. I have good reason to not want a building. I have good reason to, people have asked me, like, oh, if you ever grew a bit, would you take an income? I don't know. I'll tell you what, there's something beautiful about my life. I give credit, by the way, to Pastor Brian. So Brian, he is a nurse, does that during the day. Now, groovy, he gets to do most of his work at home because he does reports and stuff. But one of the things that he understands and I understand is that the moment you start to take an income, in our day and age, there's just something there. And what true people of God want is to keep things pure, holy, righteous, good, and to not put yourself in a place that you can have a snare. Now, granted, we're pretty small, so I'm not worried about it. But I want you to know that's the kind of heart that we just want to continue with. I want to have a heart, and you want to have the kind of heart that the thing that is happening to the people of Israel is the same thing that is happening to us. Yahweh has given us his Moedim, his appointed times. He's given us his way, and he wants to take up full residence in our lives. And the ravens and the wolves are after us. But ultimately, the King of Kings has taken down our slaughterer, has taken care of death for us. And we just need to walk in that, this is probably a frank word, that area of liminality, where we're just between, and it's just this time between us and our last breath, and we just got to stay in this area where we're relying on God, Yahweh, in all things, knowing that he will not stop the work that he has started in us. As he's chipping away at us. And here's the thing. Sometimes 40 years have to pass. It's a long time in your life before something happens. But just so you know, there could be a possibility that what you thought was dead will not be dead. I believe it, you believe it, and it might require some faithfulness on our part. But here's the thing that I can't answer for you because it's just true. I can't answer it. What are you supposed to do? But here's what I know about Gideon when he's hiding, threshing in the winepress, is he didn't know either, but an angel of the Lord showed up. And what I can tell you is when the Lord wants to get a message across to you, he will show up. Sometimes it's a burning bush. Sometimes it's this other way. I look in the Bible, I'm like, there's just not a lot of boxing you into something. But one thing I know is he will get to you somehow. What do you have as we wrap up here? Do you have any questions or insights to chapter 8 that would be helpful for us? Questions or insights?
Hey, Jacob again. I just was observing that this ornamental ephod became a snare to Israel, much in the same way that that garment from Shinar was a snare when they went to take Ai.
Yeah, that's Achan's sin.
Yeah,
Yep.
Achan's sin
Yep.
is that there. So it's just this repetitive thing going on where they allow themselves to be snared up. And then another thing that I thought was interesting is that in the commands for the king in Deuteronomy, they're not supposed to do 4 things. And one of those things is they are not to accumulate large amounts of gold and silver. And so by taking this gold and silver as a sort of tribute, he's actually taking a tithe, which is a no-no. And he's aggrandizing himself in the way that a king would. And I noticed when you're reading the text there that he has that concubine, but it's not the concubine that names the child. He does. He actually names the kid, Avimelech, my dad is king.
Yeah.
And so it's like he's doing all the things that if you just look at the book of Deuteronomy, it's already on the wrong trajectory for kingship, which is kind of where we end up with Shaul and his kingship, is he's the asked for king. And he tries to placate it and say, oh, no, I'm not going to be your king. But it's like, really? So I was just observing some patterns there that as we see the commandments, it's like there's certain things that a king's not supposed to do, and you just broke a couple of them out of the gate.
Thank you. In the back.
I'm Victor. I just want to thank you for every time that you give the meaning of someone's name. It keeps encouraging me to look for those, the definition and meaning of names, because Abimelech, the son of a king, as you explained, it gives insight into he didn't accept kingship, but it said a lot about what he thought about himself, even though he said, no, I'm not going to be a king over you. So it just encourages me to begin to keep looking at the definition and meaning of the names in Scripture, which I have not done. So,
You're welcome. Who else? Anyone else? Well, let me tell you something. I did not do these 2 chapters justice. That isn't me being self-deprecating. It's me recognizing there's a lot more going on here than just some guys lapping up some water the wrong way. There's a lot more going on than just a surface idolatry. I went so far that I couldn't talk about any of it because nor am I equipped to quite yet. There's this idea of cosmic geography and looking at all the places and how it equates to the tabernacle of God, and where Yeshua is up in Nazareth, kind of this gatekeeper. Who's the gate? Yeshua. I am the way, the truth, and the life. There's only one way. And so he's, in a sense, on this ridge guarding that, and he's bringing life into the territory. And I was able to show a picture, but the geography of Israel itself, and I was able to go back and look at all the places that you just kind of read over it and you're like, ooh, I've seen that before. And then you go back into Genesis and find it, what happened there. And where I really did, I tried, but it's hard for me. And that is to go back to find out where the trees are, the stones were, what's happening there. Those trees are vitally important to the narrative because the trees represent a teaching. And the teaching is essentially, whose Torah are you listening to? And then there's a witness. There's the stone witness, and then there's the people witness. With the gate, when it's a metaphorical gate, but when he's healing the son that has died, the widow at Nain, and he brings life. We have these living stones, these witnesses, and there's a lot going on under the text when you relate back the places to Genesis that I'm still learning to connect myself. And I say that to you without any I'm not hurting, like, oh my gosh, I just fumbled all that up. No. I watched a few sermons on the Gideon text over the week. I'm just like, I'm going to watch, what are they saying? No, nobody touches on any of this stuff. It's all kind of this surface level And it just deals with Gideon, maybe some things about Abimelech and how he was really the king, acting like a king, but it's not going to the undercurrent of how this story lays atop of a spiritual Israel that Yahweh is looking to eradicate those that would overtake you and also eradicate death and slaughter from your life. Those are the parts that I'm learning, and I'm just inviting you to learn along with me because you don't learn this stuff in seminary because that's not how that works. Let's pray, and then we'll do the blessing afterwards, and then we'll sing the last song together. Abba, all we want is our hearts to not give in to our own penchant for idolatry. We don't want that. And help us to accept those hopeless things in our life, because some of that is because of our own sin, and then some of it is by design because you are getting us to a place of utter hopelessness. So when you act, we'll know it. And Abba, because you know I talk to you a lot, I just haven't seen you do a lot of miracles in my life. I've seen incremental things like I know you've provided, I know you've done things, but I frankly have not seen any big stuff. I don't know that I need to see big stuff, Abba, but I know you can. I know that you can do things, and I don't want to be a false prophet. I don't want to go to someone and say, you know, this big thing that you think is dead, it's going to change by this time next year. I know you can, but you've not told me to say anything. I'd really like to see some big things. And it doesn't have to be my life. I'd love to see it in my friends' lives. Finances completely restored. Houses, babies, healings, cancer done. All those things, I pray in the name of Messiah Yeshua, that you would show up and that you would get all the glory. And I just know in my heart and my friends' hearts, what we want more than anything is we want you to fully conquer us, that we might fully decrease, and Messiah Yeshua would be full in our lives. That's what we want. And help us to genuinely want that. That would be a miracle, and a big one too, that we would get rid of ourselves completely. And we'll trust you to finish that work in us. In the name of Messiah Yeshua, amen. Can you stand and we'll sing a last song together, please?